I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, host of the DarkWolf's Den Show, and you're listening to Rippin' Common Sense Radio, the Rippin' Rabbit Hole.
Unlocked and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. Is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion. Real or just illusion, manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests, are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Rippin' Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
Okay, did we get the Multiverse broadcaster online? Okay, the guy from tech support. Yeah, I found a tech support for a Multiverse broadcaster, yes. Now, why are you so surprised by that? Anyway, to get it going, we ain't got time, guys. We got to hit that red button. No, not the green button. Not the orange button. No, to the left. No, your other left. Yeah, that one. That one, yes, hit it. Hit it.
Hello. Lasers. Hello. This is My Life DIY, and
Hi, this is JoJo.
Hi, my name is Ash.
Hey everybody, it's AJ the Rippin' Rabbit.
This is Cynthia Sue Larson.
This is your man Meta, aka Propagate This Light.
And you're now listening
to DarkWolf's Den.
The DarkWolf's Den Show on Rippin' Common Sense Radio.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
Are ghosts real?
We had 1,000 hours of continuous communication with the spirit world.
Does time travel actually exist?
The laws of physics seem to be compatible with time machines.
You know, sometimes I wonder about reincarnation. Don't you?
A 4-year-old boy in Adelaide, Australia, has told his parents that he used to be Britain's Princess Diana.
What would happen if the world found out that aliens were real?
I didn't say disclosure would be easy, but what is the alternative?
To establish a space force as the 6th branch of the armed forces.
We have so many questions and yet so little time, so to have you here, the pleasure is all mine.
Coming to you from a secret mountain cave, hidden deep within the Idaho wilderness. This is the DarkWolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and we are broadcasting live across the multiverse from a secret cave, hidden high up in the beautifully snow-covered peaks of the Idaho mountains. That's right. We're ripping through the electromagnetic soup, tearing through the atmosphere, and tunneling away into your radio like a quantum particle. This is the DarkWolf's Den Show for Thursday, June 17th, 2021. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are covering a topic that spans from the paranormal to the scientific, from the Mandela effect to the leading scientific theories of reality itself. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be discussing the multiverse and the multivariables that could be existing therein. So much to talk about and so little time to get there, ladies and gentlemen, but first, today in history. On this day in 1885, the Statue of Liberty arrived in the New York City harbor aboard the French ship Isère. I actually had to look that up, and that is the closest that I could pronounce that, so I do hope that is right. The ship Isère delivered the Statue of Liberty to the New York harbor on this day in 1885. And that is today's Today in History. And of course, she still stands there to this day. Well, actually, she stands now in the New Jersey harbor, if you look it up. And she's no longer on Ellis Island, and according to history, never was. She was always on Liberty Island, which is another huge Mandela effect. And we'll come back around to the Mandela effect in just a moment. But before we get to that, we've got one more segment to do.
Say what?
Folks, check this out. I believe that English humorist, satirist, and author of fantasy novels Terry Pratchett has found the shortest unit of time available to man. Check this out. He says, and I quote, "The shortest unit of time in the multiverse is the New York second, defined as the period of time between the traffic light turning green and the cab behind you honking," end quote. Again, that is Terry Pratchett, English humorist, satirist, and author of fantasy novels. I gotta say, that's gotta be the shortest time length I believe that I know of.
Say what?
And speaking of time, it is now time to cover the topic that we were supposed to cover last week, and that is the multiverse. And the multiverse is a fascinating topic, right? Absolutely fascinating. There's so many interpretations, like the idea that there could be 30 other me's or a million other me's right now doing the same radio show to you guys listening to this radio show in all these other dimensions. Or perhaps I'm doing a show about cats, or perhaps I'm doing a show about baking, but I'm getting too far into it. But that is the idea of the multiverse in just a nutshell, of course, right? And the Mandela effect is a huge phenomenon. For those that don't know, that is how I started my YouTube channel. It is a phenomenon that I've taken on head on, a phenomenon that I 100% believe in. I know that it is 100% real, the Mandela effect. But one of the leading theories for the causes of the Mandela effect is the idea of our consciousness, or us, if you will, slipping through different multiple universes. And as crazy and as science fiction as this may sound at the get-go, it may not be as science fiction as one would think. As a matter of fact, it may be a lot closer to science fact. And here is why we should not giggle when we hear the idea of multiverses and sliding between multiverses. I've been no two ways about it. I've not been a proponent of this theory of the cause of the Mandela effect. It is the leading theory in the community, but it's just not one that I personally subscribe to. But as the theory guy, I have to kind of stay unbiased and not to subscribe to any, right? But the multiverse theory might be one that I should subscribe to, right? Because science actually has a lot to say about it.
I've been talking to physicists who tell me about multiple universes and explain remarkable mechanisms of how they work. And when I go home and think at night, I want to integrate and really understand that this is more than metaphor. I mean, this is potentially real. What does it mean? What do multiple universes really mean?
In physics, we have something called the giggle factor.
It's not only in physics. You find this a lot when you start explaining paranormal stuff to people. You get the same giggle factor.
When you mention parallel universes, the eyes sort of roll up and you giggle and you say to yourself, oh, this is just silly. This is nuts. However, things have changed now. The paradigm has shifted. The multiverse idea, once thought to be so crazy it only belonged on evening night television, has now become the dominant theory in cosmology. It's unavoidable. You cannot avoid the theory of the multiverse.
You cannot avoid the theory of the multiverse in cosmology. Now that is incredibly intriguing. But to discuss the multiverse, we must first have a small discussion on the idea of dimensions. Dr. Kaku, can you kind of explain to us what the dimensions are? When we discuss the first, second, and third dimension, what exactly does that mean?
Let me tell you a story. When I was a child growing up in San Francisco area, I used to visit a Japanese tea garden and to visit the carp swimming just beneath the lily pads in a two-dimensional pond. I used to spend hours looking at them. They would swim forward, backward, left and right. Their eyes were to the side, and they couldn't see me. I was in the third dimension. I was in hyperspace. They were totally unaware that there was a universe beyond their pond.
Of course, we only know the reality with which we are presented, correct?
And then I thought, well, what happens if I reach down and grab one of the fish, lift the fish up? Maybe that fish was a scientist, and the scientist would say, bah, humbug, science fiction, there's no world of up. Up does not exist. Well, I would grab this scientist, lift them up in the world of up, hyperspace, the third dimension. What would he see? He would see beings breathing without water, a new law of biology. Beings moving without fins, a new law of physics. And then I would put the fish back into the pond. What kind of stories would he tell?
Or alternately, what would it look like to the fish if I put my hand into the pond? That would look like God to the fish, right? Sticking their finger down into the reality in which the fish knows.
Well, today, we physicists believe, we cannot prove it yet, but we are the fish. We spend all our life in three dimensions. We go forward, backward, left, right, up, down, thinking that anything beyond our pond, anything beyond our little puny universe is science fiction. We say, bah, humbug. We can't say that anymore because the concept of higher dimensions now is the biggest game in town. You see, in 3 dimensions, there's not enough room to put all the laws of physics. But when you go to this larger pond, this pond of hyperspace, then all the laws of physics just fit together like a jigsaw puzzle.
So in 11-dimensional hyperspace, all of the laws of physics fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. And Dr. Kaku, can you kind of give us an analogy as to a way to think about this in a physical way?
I like to think of a crystal. Let's say a crystal, a beautiful crystal, shatters and lands on a tabletop. And they're little insect-like flatlanders living on this tabletop. And they say, let us reassemble the crystal. Well, they bring it together, and then they have one crystal. It's called the quantum theory. They assemble other pieces of the crystal. It's called relativity, theory of space-time. But then they try to bring these 2 chunks together, and they cannot. No matter how they bring these chunks together, they cannot. And then one day, someone says, let us go to the world of up. Let us move one crystal up, and then fit it into the 3rd dimension, and it will create a beautiful unified crystal. That's where we are today, we think. We live in a 3-dimensional world. We see pieces. We see the electromagnetic force. We see gravity. We see nuclear force. Little pieces of this unified field theory. We bring them together. Now we have the theory of the quantum theory, the theory of the small, the theory of atoms. We have the theory of Einstein, the theory of space, time, relativity, but they don't fit together.
As we famously know, most physicists are looking for that theory of everything that will fit together, the micro and the macro.
Until you go into hyperspace, and then they fit together beautifully.
And this hyperspace, according to string theory, is 11 dimensions. The 3 dimensions we see, plus time, that makes 4, and 6 smaller dimensions, so small that the only thing that can escape through it would be gravity. And gravity slipping through these other dimensions may explain why gravity is so weak. But where's it going? Well, it could be going to a parallel universe. Now that we've got a good understanding of what dimension and 11 dimensional hyperspace is, a good general idea of it, now we can get back to our main point.
Now realize that Einstein gave us this idea that the universe is a soap bubble of some sort. We live on the skin of this bubble. The bubble is expanding. That's one of the greatest experimental achievements of the last century, the observation of an expanding bubble. Well, run the videotape backwards. Then the bubble may have come from an instant, a dot. The universe was smaller than a basketball. You could put the universe in your pocket. The universe was smaller than an electron. But if this bang happened once, it can happen again and again.
And as you guys have heard me say before on this show, there's nothing I've found in the universe that is singular. From souls, even though you can say each one is individually unique, there's more than one soul. There's more than one everything in the universe, more than one star, more than one light, more than one planet, more than one everything in the universe, which is another reason that I say life exists very abundantly throughout the universe, because again, there's nothing that is singular. So what about the universe itself? If the Big Bang can happen once, how can it not happen over and over and over and create many, 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 many more universes?
And again, even as we are talking, universes may have been created even as we begin this discussion. And this is mind-boggling, realizing that entire universes may be created even as we take our shower.
However, there isn't exactly an agreement between scientists as to how the universes are created and what interpretation is correct of the multiverse, because apparently there are a multitude of multiverse theories.
There are some times when a science word is downright confusing. One such word is multiverse. After all, we already have the word universe. Universe means everything, all of creation, as far as we can see, from the moment it was created to the very end of time. Everything. So that is the beginning of the confusion and even apparent absurdity. Multiverse means multiple universes, multiple everythings. Now wait a minute while that sinks in so you can think about it and go, huh.
Huh. So multiple everythings, including You.
So let's put aside the obvious language and logic issues and see exactly what scientists mean. To do that, we need to slightly limit what the word universe means to a practical scientist. It means everything that could affect us in any way. That means everything in a bubble around us that is 14 billion years old.
Or what would be referred to as the observable universe.
Taking into account the expansion of the universe, that's a bubble 92 billion light years across. So that's a huge volume, but it isn't infinite. In addition, we mean anything that exists in our familiar dimensions of forward and backward, up and down, and left and right. You can imagine that other dimensions exist that we can't communicate with. That's kind of a mind-blowing idea, but it's at least possible.
As we just discussed, the 11-dimensional theories of string theory.
If this is what we mean by the universe, we can then see what scientists mean when they talk about the multiverse. Now, it's important to realize that we don't know that multiverses exist. They very well may not.
In the second half, we're going to go over some case files that may actually prove more so than not that the multiverse probably does exist. And I know everybody who's Mandela affected, at least a good majority, I ain't going to say everybody, a good majority of the Mandela affected have no doubt in their minds that the multiverse exists.
But here are some ideas for different kinds of possible multiverses.
And which one is correct is still hotly debated amongst scientific circles, including the string theory that we heard about just a little bit ago from Dr. Michio Kaku. Albeit the leading theory, it is still yet one of the argued theories and debated theories amongst the scientific community. So you guys listen up. We're going to have a vote after this, 1, 2, or 3, and find out what you guys think is the actual interpretation of the multiverse. Here's your options. Listen up.
The first kind is the simplest and least exotic. We'll call it version 1, and this one hinges on the idea that the universe is infinitely large. That means that our visible universe is just one of literally an infinite number of volumes the size of our universe. These other universes could be similar to ours or quite different. If the laws of physics change with position, that also means that some of these volumes include ones in which life isn't even possible. Perhaps even more mind-blowing, with an infinite number of universes, there is somewhere another universe that is utterly identical to ours, and the identical you is currently listening to the same video.
Or in this case, the same radio show. So that is the one that we normally think of and reference when we're talking about the multiverse, right? 100 million different, infinite, not even going to put a number on it, infinite number of other universes, some just like this, others not so much, that all have just a slightly different history to them, right?
And there's another universe in which I can only speak if it is permitted by our cat overlords. Infinite means infinite, and that means all things are possible.
Hey, Joe, are we broadcasting to the cat dimension? You don't know? I don't know either. Well, if we are broadcasting to the cat dimension, I do apologize to the overlords. I did forget to submit that paperwork.
So that's a pretty amazing kind of multiverse, but the others are even more exotic. Multiverse version 2 is an offshoot of an idea called cosmic inflation. I've talked about inflation in another video, but the basic idea is that when our universe was very young, briefly it expanded at speeds faster than the speed of light. You can expand that idea even further and imagine that during inflation, many small bubbles expanded super fast. These independent bubbles aren't part of our three-dimensional universe. They're completely separate from ours. Further, and here's a weird twist, throughout the universe, inflation continues to occur, with bubbles popping up all the time, each creating its own infinite universe. In fact, it's kind of hard to create a mathematical model of inflation that doesn't lead to the multiverse.
And I wonder if that's the cosmological models that they were referencing just a little bit ago. And the idea here is also been expanded to the thought that these bubbles bounce off each other, and it's them running into each other that causes big bangs and new bubble universes to be created, one right after the other. And this would take place, of course, in the 11-dimensional hyperspace.
Okay, so I'm not done blowing your mind. Version 3 of the multiverse idea originates in thoughts about quantum mechanics, specifically the many worlds hypothesis.
Which, for the sake of this discussion, is also known as the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. And this may be yet another one that you guys are quite familiar with.
You may know that in quantum mechanics that everything is handled probabilistically and that objects can be in two different states at the same time. Perhaps the most famous example of this is Schrodinger's cat, in which a cat is put in a box with a vial of cyanide and a radioactive material. When the radioactive material decays, it breaks the vial and the cat dies. But, according to one interpretation of quantum mechanics, until we open the box to see if the radioactive material has decayed or not, the cat is both alive and dead.
Once again, I'm sure most, if not all of our audience is quite familiar with the Schrodinger's cat experiment, as we have referenced it many times here on the show.
In the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, when you open the box, the universe splits in two. In one universe, the cat is alive, and in the other, it's dead. This creation of universes continues all the time with every decision that's made. And none of these universes can communicate with one another. With a proliferation of universes, we now have a multiverse.
And this is what people generally reference when they're talking about timelines. A lot of people kind of intertwine the word timeline with this interpretation of the many worlds theory of quantum physics, that every decision you make causes a split, and one of you does one thing and one of you does the other, and the timeline split off away from each other to a degree that they can never come back together, right? If they're facing away, just think of two lines that are facing away from each other like in a triangle, they will never come together, no matter how far they go into eternity, right? So this is the idea of the many worlds theory. And the only idea or only problem I have with that one is I don't think it's every single millisecond a new one is created. I think due to the law of conservation of energy, it's when we make the bigger decisions, the ones that could be literally life or death, that would make a universal reality split. That is my opinion. I don't know that for fact, but what do you guys think? What is your opinion? Do you think interpretation number 1, number 2, or number 3 is the correct interpretation for the multiverse theory and what's going on? So go ahead and put it in chat if you're over on the YouTube. Put a 1 if you think that there's always a bunch of big bangs just randomly going on out of space-time in 11 dimensions, and these universes are literally just popping into existence. Put a 2 if you think that it is literally bubbles that bounce off of each other and create new universes. Or put a 3 if you think it's every decision we make crosses off and makes a new universe. 1, 2, or 3, go ahead and put it in the chat now, and it ought to be interesting to see what comes out of that. And I don't know, I'm kind of torn because they all make sense to me. Like, I can totally see all of them, and I'm sure most of you guys are the same way, right? Yeah, a lot of you guys are the same way there. They all three make sense. It's kind of hard to make a decision between which one is correct. Well, of course, we as Mandela effect in the community, we kind of lean towards that, once again, that many worlds interpretation where every decision we make makes a split off. And if you look at some of the evidence, that would kind of suggest it, right? Although it doesn't suggest residue. But the multiverse is such a strange concept that there could be all these parallel universes in 11-dimensional hyperspace. So what's to say we can't? If gravity can leak between these, and that's the theory right now in science, is that gravity leaks between these universes. If they're linked even by that portion, then what's to say that the right gravitational anomaly couldn't open what would be called a portal or a doorway into one of these parallel alternate dimensions? Because it could be just like the dimension you're in right now. The physical objects around you, there could be another you in that dimension. Perhaps he's a rock star, right? You guys remember the TV show Sliders? That was a really, really amazing example of this concept. The main characters would literally slide or jump between different parallel universes. In one, maybe the main character was a bum, and the other, maybe he was a president or a rock star, or whatever the case may be at the time. You know, there was always a different outcome for what you could have been, and every outcome of your life plays out. Every aspect of every outcome of every decision you make plays out on some level in a multiverse aspect. And that is the whole concept, basically, of the multiverse. But is there any evidence? Is there any real physical evidence aside from the scientific theories? Are there any eyewitnesses? Are there any case files that we have found that would suggest that this is the case? Well, actually, there are quite a few, and we're going to go over some of those in the second half, and that second half is coming up here in just a moment. We're going to fire the Multiverse broadcaster back up right after these messages. Don't you touch that dial. That's right.
We got to stoke the fires and run off the men in black. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Oh, yeah, that's right, on a Thursday night. Hi, everyone, it's AJ, the Rippin' Rabbit. Are you enjoying tonight's look at the multiverse theory? I know I am. If you are and you haven't done so already, please make sure to thumb up Jerry Hicks and the Darkwolf's Den Radio Show. And make sure to subscribe to Rippin' Rabbit Hole, and you'll get our notifications every time we go live. We're here every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, bringing you the very best of common sense radio, the Rippin' Rabbit Hole. I'll return again tomorrow night, Friday. Can you believe it? June 18th. Oh my goodness. Starts at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Come along with me down the rabbit hole of ratings and reviews. Just what do those stars in the cloud mean for you as a consumer? And what do they say about the businesses? And what happens when reviews and ratings kind of dominate whether or not you're in business? We're going to talk about it tomorrow night. It's going to be a fun rabbit hole to explore. That is for sure. Then Saturday night, come along and explore extreme wealth. Now, there's rich, there's fame, there's rich and fame, but it does not compare to the extremely wealthy. That's right. We're going to dive deep down the rabbit hole of extreme wealth Saturday night. And then we're going to end out the weekend right together Sunday night with a visual broadcast on YouTube coinciding the night at the museum. Come along with me as we explore down the rabbit hole of a virtual field trip. I love get the bus ready, buckle up the seatbelts. Sunday night, we're going to end out the weekend right together on a virtual field trip around the world of some of the greatest museums. It's going to be a night at the museum. I can't wait to end out the weekend right together with you. With our visual broadcast, a new format that we've decided to adopt for Sunday nights. Of course, June kicked it off with the Fantastic Fun Show, the all-new Fantastic Fun Show. Coming up on Sunday night, I'm also going to be talking about new potential names. Either way, it's a visual broadcast that took place last week, our Magic Show broadcast. Put a 1 in the chat room if you've attended one of those broadcasts. Put a 2 in the chat room if you've been at both. And put a 3 in the chat room if you've just absolutely loved them either way. I can't wait. We'll return to Jerry Hicks and the Darkwolf's Den for Thursday night, June 17th, 2021. You're listening to the Rippin' Common Sense Radio Network, the rippinrabbithole.com.
This is My Life DIY, and
hi, this is JoJo.
Hi, my name is Ash.
Hey everybody, it's AJ the Rippin' Rabbit.
This is Cynthia Sue Larson.
This is your man Meta, aka Propagate This Light.
And you're now listening
to Darkwolf's Den.
The Darkwolf's Den Show on Rippin' Common Sense Radio.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the Darkwolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and welcome back to the second half of the DarkWolf's Den Show. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about the multiverse and the many, many theories that have been discussed in science nonetheless so far, having to do with the multiverse. Hold on, I'm getting a note here real quick. Let's see what this says. Hold on. So, okay, apparently we are broadcasting to the Cat Overlord dimension. Apparently they have contacted us, but we don't speak cat, so we weren't sure what they were saying, so we just put on the Meow Mix song instead. All right, let's take a listen in over there real quick and see if they're enjoying the Meow Mix song. Ladies and gentlemen, the Cat Overlord dimension. Check it out. The Cat Overlord dimension, ladies and gentlemen. Sounds like they're having a good time, right? What do you guys think? Sounds like they're having fun to me. If you guys are having fun and enjoying the show so far, and you'd like to help support us here, we are community supported and completely grassroots, community generated press. And if you would like to support what we do here, drop down to the details section on either the Rippin' Rabbit Hole YouTube or the DarkWolf's Den Show YouTube, and you're going to find a multitude of ways to support us. As well as we have just recently started accepting cryptocurrency. So if you would like to support us that way, that's also now an option. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, seriously, let's get back to the topic at hand. There's a lot of discussion about the multiverse, and we just heard from the Cat Overlord universe. Apparently, they aren't too happy about our wolf broadcast. Go figure. But that said, we're going to go over some case files now that may really suggest that there's not only multiple universes, but the ability to travel between multiple universes is actually a lot more real and happening a lot more often than one may think.
We have the story of Carol Chase McElhenney. One day in 2006, Carol was driving through San Bernardino, California on her way to Paris, California, where she was going to stay for a few days. On her travels, she saw a sign for Riverside, which was nearby, and she decided that since her family had roots there, maybe it was time to stop in for a visit. As she went into Riverside, she realized that everything looked different from how she remembered it, and was unable to find her old house that she grew up in.
Which, let's be fair, places change over time. Right? Well, it's not always the same when it's been years since you've been back there.
She tried to go to the street that her grandmother used to live on, but that one was different too. And when she tried to visit her grandparents' graves at the cemetery, the whole place didn't even exist. Even the people who were living in the town gave Carol a bad feeling, and she didn't even want to get out of her car. She decided she would just be better off continuing on her trip and left Riverside. Carol didn't end up returning to Riverside until a few years later, after her dad had passed and she was attending the funeral. To Carol's surprise, when she went to Riverside this time, everything was as she remembered it from her childhood.
Now wait a second, things couldn't have completely changed like that much, and then everything just switched back when she went back the next time. That's a little more hard to explain. It's kind of like those Mandela effect flip-flops, right? It's either one way or the other, but it can't have been wrong both times.
Carol believes that day that she ended up in some sort of parallel universe form of Riverside, and she even said that she felt like if she left her car that day, she was going to get stuck there.
And that reminds me of another case where there was a time slip, quote, quote, we could even dare call it a parallel universe slip, but a time slip where the lady that was involved ended up sticking the left half of her body into a doorway, and when she was pulled out of it, the left half of the body went completely numb, almost stroke-like. So there was a physical effect to be paid, and that's interesting that this girl would have the same feeling. But there are certain places on Earth where this is actually more likely to happen than not.
The Marco Oasis forest in Peru has been called a doorway to another dimension for centuries because of all the stone figures that resemble human faces and religious figures, and because of the amount of people who go missing and never get found.
And as we know, if you were here last night, we discussed the Alaskan Triangle and the many disappearances that were unexplained there, as well as a number of other episodes we've discussed the missing people that have just vanished into thin air. They could be due to these doorways or portals to literal other dimensions. It makes you wonder if they didn't step into a parallel world, and to them everything's just a little more strange, right? Like they're experiencing the most ultimate of Mandela effects, right?
There was a group of friends who decided to enter the forest despite all of these stories, and they ended up stumbling upon a cabin that appeared to have some sort of party going on inside. As the group went up to the cabin, they saw people inside, but all of the people were in 17th century garb, and nothing that was modern or similar to what the group of friends was wearing. One of the friends began to try and enter the cabin and was halfway in the door when the friends quickly pulled her back. After being pulled out, it was discovered that the half of her body that had entered the cabin was now paralyzed. If her body really did become paralyzed because it had entered another dimension, that would definitely explain all of those strange stone statues.
Wow, and when I mentioned that, I did not even realize this was the very same case file. How you like that? Our next case file, though, you probably have heard of. We presented this case file more than once here on this show.
We have the old story of the Green Children of Woolpit. In the 12th century, it is said that 2 children were discovered just outside of Woolpit, Great Britain, but what was so weird about them is that they had green skin. When the children were brought back into the city and given food and water, they refused to eat anything other than raw beans. Eventually, their green skin began to fade and turned into a more normal human color. One of the children passed away, but the girl continued to grow and eventually learned English. When she was finally able to communicate with those around her, she told the story of how her and her brother had come from a place that was in constant darkness called St. Martin's Land. Everyone from her town lived underground, and everyone had the same green skin.
Which, to be fair, some have suggested that this may not be a parallel universe, but more the hollow earth, yet that is still in debate in some paranormal circles.
The girl and her brother were wandering around one day when they came across a cave, and they decided to enter. They kept walking and eventually came to Woolpit, and when they turned around, the cave they had been in disappeared. Did this cave act as a portal to an alternate reality for these kids? If so, I don't ever want to end up where they come from because it does not sound nice.
And of course, we know our ancestors revered caves for many, many years. And perhaps it's because the acoustics of caves, right? Perhaps it sets up a sine wave or a sound wave that actually opens those doors, that has that right dimensional vibration to open doors. Perhaps caves are actually an intricate part of it. Well, I don't know, it's just a theory. Let's check out our next case file and see what we can garner from that.
We have the story of James Richards. In 2009, James was walking his dog when he tripped and knocked his head, rendering him unconscious. When he woke up, he found himself beside some sort of machine he didn't recognize, and there was another man named Jonas who said he had just found James' body while he was on a work trip for the interdimensional travel company that he worked for. What?
The Interdimensional Travel Agency. Now, this is the only case file I think I've ever heard of this, so maybe it's just something that we don't get to experience that often. Maybe there are those that know how to travel between these parallel dimensions with ease.
The two ended up striking up some sort of conversation, I guess like you would when someone just casually tells you that they travel through dimensions for work. They started chatting about what pop culture was like in each of their dimensions, and they came to discover that, of course, the Beatles existed in both of their dimensions. Jonas ended up explaining that in his dimension, the Beatles were all still alive, and they had never actually broken up.
And as insane as this case file already sounds, There's actually evidence to support this one.
Jonas gave James a cassette tape of the Beatles music from his dimension that certainly does not exist in ours. When James returned to our universe, he ended up uploading the tape to a website called thebeatlesneverbroakeup.com.
And I do believe that that is still available. It was a couple years ago when I went and listened to it. And a lot of people have said it's just remixes of their older work. I don't know. I suggest you go check it out and see what you think for yourself.
We have another Reddit post from Tiger King Quentin. The user explains that this story takes place when they were 8 years old in Florida with their family and their friend's family for a 2-week vacation. The friend really wanted to go to Wet n Wild and begged for his parents to take them there, so they ended up going one day during the trip. The boy and his dad ended up going into the wave pool that day and were mainly staying in the shallow area. After a while, a larger wave comes their way and it takes the boy underneath the water. He realizes he can't feel the bottom anymore and begins to panic, trying to break the surface of the water. When he reaches the top and gets his head out of the water, he realizes that he is no longer at Wet n Wild, but is in the middle of an ocean a couple hundred meters from an island.
That's definitely a huge change from Wet n Wild.
He doesn't know where or what this island is, but after a few seconds he begins to feel lightheaded and sinks back into the water. Luckily, he then feels some hands under his arms and he realizes his dad is lifting him out of the water back at Wet n Wild, asking him if he's alright. Maybe this wave pool really did take this kid to an alternate dimension.
Some would argue that this was just a conscious or subconscious effect of being half drowned under the water. I don't know. This sounds like a really wild case file to me. And I would be remiss if I did not include our next case file.
We have a story coming from Tokyo in 1954. At the Haneda airport, a plane from Europe landed and dropped off its passengers. As the passengers made their way through customs, one man told the officials that he was just on a normal business trip that he made regularly. He spoke French as his first language, but could also speak Japanese and a few other languages. Officials then asked him where he was from, and his response is where things take a turn. He said he was from a place called Torrid, which was on the border between France and Spain.
A country that, in this reality anyway, does not exist.
When officials told him that the place didn't exist, he gave them a passport that had been issued by this country that isn't real. This passport had also been stamped, validating all of the previous trips he had said he went on, including his previous trips to Japan. Officials called the company that he said he was meeting with, and the company said that they had never heard of him or his company before. They then called the hotel he said he had a reservation at, and the bank that was listed on his checkbook. The hotel said that there was no reservation for him, and the bank just didn't exist at all. Officials thought that maybe he was confused, so they showed him a map and pointed to the country of Andorra, asking him if this is what he meant. The man began to get upset, saying that Andorra didn't exist and that it had misplaced Torrid where he claimed to be from.
According to some accounts, he actually claimed that Torrid was hundreds of years old in a kingdom that was a very proud kingdom, and yet nobody has ever heard of this place.
Customs decided to detain the man and put him in a hotel room for the night while they decided what to do next. The next day when they went to collect the man, he had totally disappeared with all of his personal identification and documents. Police searched for this missing man, but he was never found. Maybe this man somehow accidentally found himself in a parallel universe separate from his own, and I just hope he was able to make it back to wherever he was from and return to his normal life.
And when you hear stories like that, and you think about the Mandela effect, and how people are affected by the Mandela effect, right? How it feels like they're jumping, or we're jumping between multiple universes, like things are slightly different for a little while, and then they're not. But some things change and don't switch back at all. So it does make you wonder if we could be sliding through the multiverse. But what do you guys think? Do you think the multiverse exists? Do you think that it could be something that is something we interact with on a daily basis? Or do you think it's something that we're just dreaming to be able to do? In the end, ladies and gentlemen, all you can do is look at the evidence, apply a little common sense, and You be the judge. We got to close it out. That's right, that's it for this episode of the Darkwolf's Den Show for Thursday, June 17th, 2021. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, the den may be closing now that we've got the weekend kicked off right, but don't you worry, the weekend fun has only just begun. That's right. Make sure you come out tomorrow, Friday, June 18th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, on the rippinrabbithole.com and Rippin' Common Sense Radio, as AJ the Rippin' Rabbit takes back to the airwaves with an all-new episode of the Rippin' Rabbit Hole live show. That's right. On Friday, he's going to be talking about ratings and reviews. Why is the ratings and reviews system there? Why is it in place? Why was it even created? Was it originally meant as censorship in the earliest forms? Or does it actually help in society? And where from here are we going with it? All that more coming up on Friday, June 17th, 2021. Friday, June 18th, 2021. 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, right here on Rippin' Common Sense Radio. All shows here on Rippin' Common Sense Radio start at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. That's right. Then on Saturday, AJ Rippin' Rabbit will be back with an all-new episode of the Rippin' Rabbit Hole live show. And he's going to be talking about extreme wealth. Not just a little wealth, extreme wealth. Extreme power corrupts extremely, right? Extreme wealth could do the same thing. Could it be a downfall, a bad thing to be having that much money? Or could it be beneficial? All that more coming up on Saturday, June 19th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Then on Sunday, the Rippin' Rabbit, Mr. AJ is going to round out the weekend right with the Rippin' Rabbit Hole live show. And the visual interactive Sunday shows AJ started doing an amazing series. I am absolutely enjoying those myself. And on Sunday, he's going to be taking us to a virtual night at the museum. That's right, we're going to do some virtual museum tours, look at some ancient artifacts, and see what the museums hold of our history. That's right. And that is on Sunday, June 20th, 2021, Father's Day, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. That's right. And ladies and gentlemen, that is going to round out the weekend here on Rippin' Common Sense Radio and the rippinrabbithole.com. Speaking of the rippinrabbithole.com, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you hop on over to the rippinrabbithole.com and hop on our mailing list. We've been having some issues with our mail servers, and we're working on getting that fixed here as soon as we can. So we will eventually have the weekly emails coming out with all the episodes that the Rippin' Rabbit and myself, the Dark Wolf, will be discussing all weekend long, every weekend, right here on Rippin' Common Sense Radio. After you've signed up for that backstage pass in that email, you're also going to gain access to the Down the Rabbit Hole section. That is our exclusive social media section over there. Make sure you drop down the rabbit hole and see what's being discussed by the rest of the rabbits. And speaking of being discussed by the rest of the rabbits, if you wanted to join me for the discussion or to carry on tonight's discussion even, I'm going to go over to the 24/7 Backstage Lounge on the rippinrabbithole.com. Absolutely free, VIP. Come on over, hang out with me. I would love to see you guys over there. I love hanging out with all you guys backstage internationally. We got a great crowd back there, guys. Alright guys, on that note, it is an honor and a pleasure to be here with you guys every week. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you ring a ding-ling, ding-ding-ding that bell. And make sure you get those notifications every time we go live. That's right. If you would like to support the show once again, make sure you drop down to our details section either on the Darkwolf's Den Show or the Rippin' Rabbit Hole and find the multitude of ways to support us. And over the Darkwolf's Den Show, we've recently started accepting cryptocurrency, so do make sure you check that out if you would like to help support our grassroots, community-supported radio. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of AJ the Rippin' Rabbit, Walt House, Michael Musco, Chick Mandela Effect, Tom Bayless, and this amazing music. Get it, Tom? Come on, come on, come on. That's right, Tom Bayless, ladies and gentlemen. If you need a custom soundtrack for your next project, make sure you check out Tom Bayless and Red Shed Studios. That's right. On behalf of all these folks and our amazing mod team over in the YouTube chats, I thank every last one of you guys for being here. And remember, until next time, stay awake, but dare to dream. Good night, everybody. How? Yeah. That's right. Get down with it, Tom. We got a couple seconds left. Tom Bayless, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye. Good night, everybody.
I'm lost and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever home. Oh, what a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner, is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner, is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion?